So I have to record this again because I noticed that the output of our yesterday's class recording wasn't good. So I'm going to go over what we did yesterday. And so let's start. So we are starting our CSS journey, and we'll start by linking our style sheet to the HTML file. So we'll link it in the head tag, and right now I've already linked it. Link it in the head tag and just type style.css in this href. This style.css, we're typing it here. So to check that it's properly styled, I just gave it body and background color. Sorry. So body, and you would give it this type of bracket, then background color of red, and it shows that it has been properly styled or properly linked. So to link your HTML tags to your style sheets, we'll make use of what we call selectors. And there are four main types of selectors. So we have the universal ID class element. So I'll be starting with the universal selector, and if you notice this, my browser here, there's a bit of spacing here. So universal selector just selects everything on the browser, and it adopts whatever style you give it. So for universal selector, the sign is this asterisk. So you just press Shift and 8 on your keyboard, and you give it these brackets. So I'm going to give it a padding. We're trying to remove all the spacing. So padding 0 and margin, giving it 0. So you can see that all the spacings have been removed. So that's for universal selectors. And most of the time when you want to start styling your style sheets, you remove all the spacing so that whatever spacing you have is what you have assigned to that element. There's no default spacing from the browser. So that's for universal selector, and most of the time this is pretty much the use case for it. Then we have element selector, and we saw element selector when I checked whether the CSS is properly linked. So element selector, basically you're just using whatever element you have here, or whatever tag name you have here, you're just using it for the style sheet. So in this case, I can say I want the body. I'm going to give it a background color of gray, and we have a gray background color. So the thing about element selectors is that you have no control over your style. And what do I mean by that? Is that, for example, if you have repeating tag names and you use the element selector to style that tag, it will affect the other tags even though you've not styled them expressly. So this is what I mean. For this li, so we have like 4 li's. So if I come here and give it li, and I give it a color of so I give it a color of green, so you can see that it has affected all these li's. And that's the thing with element tag. Yes, element selector, you have no control over it. So it's best to name your tags so that you have better control of them. And you can see this when we use the ID or the class selector. So I'm starting with the ID. Here we have named this H1. We've given it an ID of heading. Now, for the ID of heading, these are unique ways of styling a particular HTML element. So now that I've given this ID, I've named it heading, I can't go and give another element in this browser or in this my HTML the same ID of heading. That's not allowed. So ID of heading, you just attribute that name to that particular element once. So this the syntax for ID. So I'm going to style this H1, that's this CSS selectors. So I can come here. For the ID, you press Shift 3 and to give you this hashtag. So I can say font size, I can say large, so or larger. I think this is larger. Okay, sorry, I didn't name it. So after giving it this pound size, I'll give it heading. That's the name that I had given it in the CSS. So okay, larger is I can give it font size. I can give it 40 pixels, and we can see it's bigger. I can give it a color of red. You can see it's bigger. So for now, I'll advise that you style your elements with pixels, so you can just play around and see whatever pixels fits what you're styling. So that's for heading. We'll say it's a unique way of styling, and you shouldn't give this name heading to another element. So if you want to style, you want to use this font size 40 and color on another element, you call it something else. You won't call it heading again. You can call it headers or whatever you want to call it, but don't call it heading and give the same thing. So if you want to repeat your styling with the name, you make use of class selector. So in this instance, and most of the time you style with classes. So in this instance, if for these ones, I gave it a class of link. For this LI, I gave it a class of link. So the syntax for class is dot, then link. I'm going to give it a font size of extra large, extra large. Or these ones are not, or font size of 20 pixels. Sometimes I just prefer using that, 20 pixels. Okay, and or extra large. So this link is just for this element selector. So you can see that, let's go back to extra large. You can see it's bigger, and let's give it a background color of green. So it's only affecting this first element because that's where we gave, that's the only element, the only tag we named. But if we want it to affect others, we'll just give it that tag and the same style applies. So that's for class. Another thing you can do is that you can house these elements. So right here, we can see we have this OL, and OL is nesting these LIs. So we say in CSS, it has a parent-child relationship. So the LI are children to the parent. Now, when we have this type of format, whatever style we attribute to the parent, which is the OL, the children can inherit from the parents. And when we style like this, it helps us in reducing the amount of code we write and making our style sheet cleaner. So in this instance, I can come to this parent, and for this parent heading, I can just give it the following style. So we can see that we're giving it a background color of yellow, and these last two li are inheriting from the parents. But you can see that these first two are not inheriting, and this is so because in our HTML we have specifically said that these li should have this styling, so they won't inherit from them. And we can see that if we just remove this one, it won't inherit from the parent. So this is another way of styling, makes it easier, and you can make use of your divs in this scenario. It will also work. So if I have a div, this one now, and I'm just going to repeat this parent class. I'm not even going to my style sheets. All I have to do is just copy and paste it, and you see it inherits the styling. So this is a simple way of doing this, or styling your elements. So the next thing we talked about was box model, and we say box model is used when you are looking at your design and the layout of elements in your browser. So, and when we're looking at box model, we're looking at, let me just clean these ones out. Okay, I can clean this one out because we won't need all this again. So for box model, we're basically looking at margin, padding, border, and the content. That's what you have typed on your browser. And we said that everything, when you are creating or styling an element, you have to visualize that every content you have has a surrounding box in it, as in it's inside a box. Now, how I like visualizing my styling is making use of these border styles so that I can visualize that everything is actually in a box. So let me start by showing you how to use the border style. So we're going to style this H2 that says box model, and I'll just come to my style here, and like here we've seen that we're giving it a class of box. So if I come to my style and I type dot box, so you have to type it exactly as it is on your HTML. So I'm giving it a border of 5 pixels, red and solid. Now it's 5 pixels. It shows how thick you want your line to be. So if it's 2 pixels, you can see that it's less thick. Red, self-explanatory. Then the solid, we have solid, that's like a continuous line. We have dashed, so this is how dashed is, and we have dotted. It just shows up as dots. So we can see that this is in a, you can call it, it's like it's a rectangle, and this is how all these ones are. By me putting this border, it just makes it clear what I'm dealing with. And all these elements have their own, like they all have their own borders. Right now it's just imaginary, we can't see it, but this line here is also applicable in all these elements. all this content we have. Now for box model, you have to calculate the padding, like how much space and how much space you have around this box. That's the whole concept of box model. So back to this border, I've showed you the different ways you can present this line, and you can also have it, you can say border top. So the border, this line is only at the top. Let me change this to solid. So this line is at the top, border bottom, the line is at the bottom, border left, you can see that line there, and border right, you can see this line at the right. So once you don't specify any border right, left, or anything, if you just put it as border, it would go all around and all the sides. So that's for border there. Then if you want to create space within this rectangle here, you make use of padding. So if I say padding top, 50 pixels, so I'm giving space at the top. If I say padding bottom, I have to put my semicolon up here. So space at the bottom, padding for the right, it won't show because we have a lot of space ordinarily, so it won't show, but padding right will give it space. Let's show padding left, will give it a lot of space. So this is one way of presenting padding. And if you just want the same padding all around, you can just say padding 50 pixels, and it will give you padding all around. As long as it's the same number you want all around, you don't have to type it all the time, you just type it once. Then if you want maybe the top and the bottom to be the same number and the left and the right to be the same number, you can say, okay, I want the top and bottom 50 pixels. You have your 50 pixels here. Then I want the left and right to be 12 pixels. And you can see it has changed. So the first one is for top, bottom. The second one is from left, right. That's what we have here. The same thing goes for for margin. Now for margin, we are looking at shifting this whole box down, not just we won't be dealing with the spacing inside, we'll be dealing with the spacing outside the element, that's the browser. So for margin, if I want to, from this top, I want there to be a space to shift it down, I'll just say margin top, maybe I'll give it 70 pixels. I can see it will shift by 70. Same thing, margin bottom, it won't show because, well, okay, shifted it up by 70. Margin right, it shifted it, and margin left, and it has shifted it. And the same thing goes for margin too, like how you can just say margin, if you want it to have the same number, you can just say margin 70 pixels, as long as it's the same number. The same thing that we said for padding. And if you want maybe the left and right to be another number, you can just specify like 30 pixels left and right, and you can see how that goes. Now, okay, yes. For this one, let me remove all this one. We talked about block level elements. You can see that this item, it spans the length, the width, sorry, of our browser. And because of that, we can't put this element, we can't put it side by side because this is blocking it. Now you can specify how wide you want this element to be. For that you will use width. So I can come here and say I want a width of, for this one, for my box, I want a width of 50 pixels. So you can see that it's 50 pixels wide. I can say I want a height too. I can say I want a height of, okay, this one was, I gave it 50%. You can also say 50 pixels, height of, this height didn't change. You can say I want a height of 100 pixels, and you can see the height there. So you can determine how wide and how long your items are. But you have to, since we said everything is a box, so you have to take note of what is inside that box, because whatever is inside that box is now restricted by this border, this measurement you've given it. So I didn't say this in the class, but let me give you this example. So in an instance where we have, I think we finished with all this, so I'm just giving, let me clear this out. Okay, so let's put this in a div now. And I'm giving it a class of let's give it a class of X. Please don't name your things X. I can't think of anything right now. Give it a better name. Well, let's give it a class of X. Let's say X parent. Okay, X parent. And this one I'll give it Y child. So a class of Y child. Give your selectors better names. It's important too. So anyway, so I'll come here and set the class of X parents. Let me just copy this here. I'll give it a width of giving it a width of 100 pixels, or let me make it 200 pixels. So you can see this is how big the parent is, and you'll notice that when I made it 100, the things in the box, you can see it's squashed up. It went on to the next line. Since this wasn't big enough, it moved to the next line. But if I give this one 200, that's the parent now, and for the Y child I give, let me add this border. For the Y child, for now, is still contained. I now give it a width of 400 pixels. You can see that it's now overflowing. And what this means is that if I have elements here that I want to put it side by side, it won't work. And the beauty of borders is that you can see what you're working with. Because if I didn't have this border and I have some elements here and I'm trying to put it here, I will be cracking my head wondering why it's not working. So the beauty of borders is that you can see what you're working with, and when you finish styling that part, you can just remove your borders and you're good to go. You know why things are the way they are. So for me, borders are very important You can use them for other things, but I most of the time use it to visualize what I'm styling with. So that's for box level elements. And I also said that we have inline elements. There are various examples of that. I showed you these buttons and this style. You can see that it's side by side. It didn't go to the next line, like if you had a div or a p tag, and you can see that when using the border, it doesn't overflow, it just goes line by line. So these are important in knowing how you style, how you lay out your elements in your browser. Then we also talked about flex. Let me clean this up. So we talked about flex, and we used the Nigerian flag. Oh, sorry. So we use the Nigerian flag, and we're trying to center it to the middle of the browser, or center it anywhere. So let me just show you for centering in the middle of the browser, of your browser. Yes, show you what we did, and we'll see other things you can do. So for that, we gave it an image, a class, and so we gave it a class. So we can see that down we're just class of flag. So if you notice here, we're just actually styling the parents. So it saved us. We didn't need to. And for flex, the first thing you do actually is that you put your elements in a div. If you are flexing maybe more than one, so you put it in a div and you style the parents. So the children will now inherit from the parents. That's the whole idea of flex. So once you start thinking of flex, you're thinking of a parent housing 2 or more children and you are trying to style, or a parent housing a child and you are styling it. And when you are styling for flex, you are styling the parents. So just have that at the back of your head. So for flex, we're styling this flag. We gave it a class of flag. Then we specified that we want it to be in the center. So we're measuring how long, the length of this our browser, and we gave it a height of 100 view height. That's the length of whatever you're viewing this you're using to view this browser. So if it's a phone, it's the same thing. If it's your desktop, it will apply. So just to view what I'm dealing with, I gave it border and all that. Let's see. So I gave it a border of black just to help me view. Then I came here, display. I said we're going to use flex. And as soon as I did that, you can see what has happened. It has taken, these items have taken the length of my browser. So display flex, align items, center. So it's no longer taking the length. Align items, center. So now let me show you what it looks like now. It's just by this side here, but we want it in the middle. Then I'll come here and type justify content center. So this will push it to the middle. You can see it's in the middle of it. And that is basically what we're dealing with. That's basically it for flex. You play around with it and that will be fine. So What if I had given it a smaller height? What would it have looked like? Does it always have to be in the center of the browser? No. If I had given it 100 pixels, this is what it would have looked like. And now you can see that it is overflowing. This my flag now is coming out of this border, and that's why it's very important to use borders to visualize what you're doing. So now I can see that the flag is bigger than it. So what I can do here, since I want the height to be 100 pixels, I can come here and reduce the size of my flag. So I'll just go to my image and reduce the size of my flag. So I'll go to my image and reduce the size of my flag. So I'll just style my image. So I'll just come here and just use the image. I'll just give it image. So I'm just using image as an element selector now, and I can specify, maybe let's use the height. I can say I want it to be a height of 200 pixels. Let's see. Was it the image? Okay. And maybe the width of, okay, I gave it a height of 100 pixels. Sorry, I gave it a height of 100 pixels, so I can't make it 200 pixels. Let's give it a height of, let's say, 50 pixels. I can see it has gone back to its small, and it's not overflowing from this one. Even the Nigerian flag, because it's quite big, so you can change the font size of it. So that's how you can deal with your flex. And for the flex, there are other properties which you will see in Flex Froggy. There's Justify Content Center, there's the Justify Content, I think, end. So you can move it around, like Justify Content end. Now it has moved to the end of my browser. The stats, there are different, so start will move it here. This one, if I want to move it up, I think this is top, or yes, top. Then if I want to move it down, it's bottom, or is it end? I think it's end. Okay, it's end. So there are different ways of doing this. You just play around with it and see what is applicable to what you want to style. Now the last thing was grid. We talked about grid layouts, and this was the grid layout. And just like flex here, we gave it a display grid. Sorry, we gave it a display grid, and we wanted four columns. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 6 elements or 6 contents, and wanted it divided into 4 columns, so we gave it 4 autos. I said if we wanted 2 columns, we'll give it auto 2, so the browser will divide it equally on its own. And so let's give it maybe 3 columns, so divided by 3. We gave it a grid row, that's the spacing in between, 30 pixels. Can give it 10 pixels. You can see the lines are smaller. Then the spacing between them, the columns, we said fix it 50 pixels. You can give it 30. You see it gets just a bit smaller. Then for the for the grid, for the divs inside the grid, this is how we styled it. And I want to just let you pay attention to how we styled this. You can see there are two elements in my style sheet. This dot grid here, let me show you what I'm doing now. This dot grid goes to this class, then this div are all these divs inside. So we're specifying, we're saying, okay, the browser should go to this, look for dot grid and look for all the divs inside the dot grid. That's the meaning of this form of styling. Please, when you check your W3 schools, there are different ways of styling. All I've done is highlight the major ones, but there are different combinations in styling this. So what I'm saying is, browser, look for a class of grid, and when you get to that class of grid, that's the first instruction, go to look for all the divs inside that class of grid, and that's what we have here, background color blue. So it gave all the divs inside this background color of blue, and that is what we have here, and that's why it looks like this. So we can also determine how wide a column is, or like an element is. So for instance, this one, I gave it, this grid here, I gave it a class of grid 1, and I wanted it to be longer. So I came here and said, this grid 1, it should start from this first column and it should end at column 3. So it now took up this space of, it will end at a column short of where you tell it to end. So you can see it didn't end at this column. This is where column 3 is, but it ended at column 2. It took up the space of column 3. So I think if I want it to end at column 3, I will come here and say end at 4, even though there are 3 columns. I think that should work. Yes. So end at 4. You can see that it pushed it and it's ending at 4. I think the same should go for rows. Let's see. Let's see, row 2. Okay. Well, we'll check out how rows work. So basically, these are the layouts for